And welcome to TIA's Network of the Future interview series as we speak to some of the conference session speakers to get a better sense of what we can expect at TIA's annual conference in Dallas on June 6th through 9th. Joining us on this segment is Bill Beasley. He's Principal Solutions Architect for Packet Optical Networking at Fujitsu Network Communications. And Bill, welcome to the program.
Oh, thanks, Abe. Glad to be here.
Oh, glad to have you. As I said, you actually are participating at TIA 2016's track session on NFV. That's again June 6th through 9th. So we appreciate you being part of that. As far as this segment, I really want to start with the relationship between NFV and 5G and whether 5G is dependent on NFV in order to really rely on its efficiencies to make it work.
I think where 5G is being dependent on NFG is the fact that right now, manufacturers are really rushing to develop equipment to support what are sort of emerging standards or evolving standards. And doing that in a hardware-based solution with multiple rounds of hardware as things iterate is expensive and cumbersome for the manufacturers and the developers. So what you're seeing is vendors using NFV virtualization approaches to be able to rapidly implement their solutions and demonstrate them, but also give them the flexibility to change over time as the standards evolve. And then ultimately what we get out of that, as these functions are virtualized, the operators should actually implement them in their networks when they become viable for production. They're going to actually get the power of scale out of NFV because they'll be able to deploy the instances in multiple locations in a very flexible way.
Let's talk about scalability for carriers. Is there a use case that you can illustrate for us on how NFV is allowing carriers to scale their networks and that to meet the demands of their customers?
Yeah, without getting into specifics that would violate NDAs, I can say that we see carriers deploying NFV to gain the ability to deploy resources on an as-needed basis in a more flexible way. They're doing this for many reasons, operations and cost avoidance, but I think the more exciting thing that we see out of NFV and the flexibility they get when they're deploying these scalable architectures is speed to market for their end customers, and that is to say they can actually deliver new services much more rapidly and meet end user customer demands in a flexible way.
So I want to talk about standardization of APIs for NFV. Of course, we have Etsy, OpenStack, Open Daylight, all created standard common APIs for NFV. But how do you choose a standard API? Is it dependent on what type of technology or layer you're trying to leverage?
Yeah, you make a good point. There's a lot of evolving standards bodies out there, and there's a couple more that you didn't mention that are actually sort of rising up the ranks and trying to produce standardized APIs to manage this. The concern obviously for carriers is, when do I start using this? Do I have to wait for the standards to do it? I think we have a pretty good set of standards in things like Etsy Nano, and then groups like OpenStack, Open Daylight, Open NFV. They're really doing a good job but they are evolving. Anybody developing products in this space is going to need, sort of reliable partners to be able to leverage this stuff early, because frankly, waiting for the technology to mature the way we would traditionally have done for past technologies sort of will doom the efforts of people wanting to deploy this type of technology. Ultimately, I think the APIs are less of a problem. If you can find good partners that can work with you and can manage that, the thing that the carriers want to look at are things like modularity, flexibility, and especially multi-vendor support in the NFV space. Those are more critical than the API standards.
So when we talk as an industry about open source for network virtualization, we tend to talk about OpenStack and Open Daylight. Let's just stick with OpenStack for now. Why is that? Why does that name keep coming up?
It's developing pretty quickly. I think most people say the development of OpenStack is pretty amazing in terms of its pace. It's been around for quite a while now, at least in technology terms. And it's very feature rich, especially in terms of compute and storage. Now, networking is a new focus for it, but it's been recognized as an important and sort of necessary technology I think what's telling about OpenStack and its popularity and where people are seeing it is the recent OpenStack Summit in Austin. Many of the service provider sessions around this were standing room only. So it's clearly something that's important to the service providers. It is gaining popularity and momentum, and it's really something that should be followed and watched closely.
Now, when we talk about, again, network virtualization, we're starting to talk about, again, next generation networking, i.e. 5G. So we talk about the future trends of 5G. So we sort of inherently need to talk about the future trends of NFV. What are these trends in the NFV space that you're seeing?
Right now, most of the NFV deployments we're seeing from real world networking tend to focus on replacing monolithic network elements and emulating those in software. A good example is a firewall. People are taking, firewalls that were physical firewalls, and now those same vendors are producing that fully functioning, feature-rich firewall as a virtualized function that can be implemented in software. What I think is going to change over time is that we will actually get away from implementing those monolithic architectures, and rather we'll implement what's called microservices. That is to say, the end user or the application on the network will ask for a service, a specific function of a firewall. Perhaps it's just NAT, perhaps it's some sort of stateful packet inspection. And those services will get instantiated, not the fully functioning firewall. Then what becomes critical is what's called service chaining. And what we'll see is microservices being instantiated within the network to meet network demands, either user demands or application demands. And then those will be service chained together to provide a unique service that provides value in a very flexible way to the end customer.
Bill, thanks for joining us, and we'll see you in Dallas on June 6th through 9th.
Oh, thank you. I'm looking forward to it.
Thanks again. And for our viewers, please visit us at TIA2016.org for the program schedule and all registration information. And if you're a startup and want to participate in TIA 2016's Startup Challenge, you can apply on TIA2016.org. So long.